Hello again, kids. Now, today I was going through the corner report of Yvonne Lane and I wanted to do it like a complete breakdown of the coroner's report because I touched on it a little bit in a former video, but I wanted to get really in depth with it because there's some weird shit going on here. However, before we get into that, I was reading over these areas and I've got my lovely assistant. This is my oldest son. Um, I was going over some of the areas with regards to the actual wound on her neck and some of what law enforcement said happened. And this is all based off of the confession of Joe Wilkes. So I wanted to demonstrate, and he's going to be my lovely little crash test dummy today. So according to Joe Wilkes' confession, he and Yvonne were sitting on the couch. Yvonne was sitting to his right, which would put him on her left. And he reached behind her, grabbed her head, and slit. Now, see, with a typical knife, what you're going to see when somebody slices from side to side sitting next to someone is you're going to see something like that. The wound is not going to be very deep, and it's not going to cover the whole neck because you're having to do it in a rush. On top of that, Yvonne Lane had no defense wounds on her hands at all. In fact, Dante, go ahead and react as you would in that situation. So reaching behind, grabbing her hair, pulling it back, immediately your hands are going to come up to protect yourself because you don't know what's happening. Now, at a later time, the police officers claimed that she had turned her head to the right as though listening for her children. Go ahead and turn your head, not keeping it up, turn your head. And that gave Joe greater access to pull her head back and do this. Okay? Minor problem with that. This is only about half of the neck. That's not going to do shit, and it's sure as fuck not going to cause the injury that you see on Yvonne Lane in the autopsy photos, which, again, I'm a little sketchy about publishing those out because she does have children. Now, the actual wound to Yvonne Lane, as it is notated in the coroner's report, begins at about 1.5 inches below the left ear, extends around here, and actually terminates about here. Now, the thing about this is that Yvonne Lane's actual injuries also included nicking of the 5th cervical vertebra in the neck on the left side. Now, what you have to understand, folks, is that right here in the neck, all through here, you've got something called the Sternomastoid Muscle. And you have one on both sides of the neck. This is, as you can see with my skinny little son, when he turns his head, you can actually see the definition of this muscle here. And these muscles are what keeps your giant ass 8-pound head on top of your neck and stable. On top of that, right here, you've got the trachea. All this is mainly cartilage, which is a pain in the ass to get through. So the wound on Yvonne Lane is one solid, swift movement. It's not involving, he's such a good sport. It's not involving any jerking. So the way that the injury actually is to Yvonne, and I'm going to demonstrate this on my son, is the only way that you could possibly get this kind of wound is if you were to either grab the hair and pull back or grab the forehead, pull back, and do this. This is the actual injury, although in Yvonne's case, it actually goes from about here, and it actually dips down about 1.5 inches on the right. Now, what this suggests is the killer was behind her. He was not to her side. To the side would not produce this kind of a wound. I don't give a fuck. Because in order to produce this kind of a wound, from sitting on the left, he'd have to pull her head back and sort of crane himself around and drag all the way. This is unnatural. You're not going to do this when you're committing a murder. You're going to go for the easiest and the fastest kill, which involves, that's only going to get about 4 inches in length on the neck. It'll do the job, but it's not going to cause the kind of injury that you see here. The killer had to be standing behind her. The fact that the hold on, you're not done yet. He's so eager to get the marker off of himself. I don't know why. The mere fact that the injury extends from about 1 inch, 1.5 inches below the left ear and dips down to 2.5 inches, 3 inches below the right ear suggests that the killer was either close to Yvonne's height. Yvonne was only 5'3" or slightly shorter, because a taller person would pull up, a shorter person is pulling down. Okay? Now, in addition to that, the fact that it was all the way around and that it completely severed the trachea is evidence that this person had a decent amount of upper body strength. And then you take into account how long. And you take into account that on the left side, when you look at the autopsy photos, the entire left side of her neck is completely open. There is no hesitation marks as in sawing. It was one swift movement. This person had to have a relatively large amount of upper body strength. So that is what I'm basing all of this off of. Now, I will go ahead and leave some links to to some various resources with regards to the muscles, the trachea, and the cervical vertebrae in the description down below. I will also leave the link to David Thorne's rally fund for his defense fund, and I will also leave the link to the wrongful conviction of davidthorne.org. Thank you all very much for watching. We'll see you soon.